Good evening, YouTube. This is Johnny. I hope you're all having a good night. Here in West Michigan, by the Great Lakes, Lake Michigan, it is December the 10th, 2019. It is 7:59 at night. And yeah, I'm having a normal night. My wife went into work early tonight because the nurse that she was going to come after, well, the nurse that was, there's always a shift change at the hospital. So when my wife comes in, a nurse gives a report and then my wife takes over. Well, the nurse that was there tonight wanted to leave early to go to a Christmas party. So my wife went to work 2 hours earlier. So my wife went to work at 6 o'clock instead of 8 o'clock tonight. Since we're having bad weather here in West Michigan, I think I'm coming down with a cold because I have been sneezing this evening. And when I start sneezing, that's always like a, I don't know what the word is, but like I'm coming down with a cold, but I hope not. So my wife went to work early, and I have been reading my books. Been reading tonight this book. I've been showing this book, the Solitudes by John Crowley, book 1 of the Egypt cycle. I'm really enjoying this, and I don't really know why, but I really have been reading it lately. Writing in my paper diary. I'm on page 1013 tonight, and I'm headed into page 1014. It's kind of early to go to bed. It's only 8:01. I usually go to bed around 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. So I can't go to bed, and I don't watch TV. I don't watch movies. I watch BookTube. Looked at some movie reviews, some CD reviews. So I thought what I would do tonight, since it's quiet, my wife went to work early, is that I've gone to thrift stores lately. Today is a Tuesday. I went to thrift stores today and found these books. And then I think I mentioned that Friday that my wife and I, after I went to the Book Nook Friday, the library used bookstore, the Book Nook, that we drove to Grand Haven to the public library there in Grand Haven, which has a used bookstore. The Cheap Stacks, and they were closed, and we visited Goodwill in another thrift store there in town in Grand Haven, and I picked up some used books to add to our library. So I thought I'd show those and show the books I got today. Today I went just a couple blocks to Bibles from Mexico to look at. I hadn't gone there in a couple of weeks to look at their used books. So what I will do right now is show you the books that I got at thrift stores in Grand Haven last Friday. I picked up this book. This is Revolutionary Road, which was made into a movie a couple of years ago by Richard Yates, who was born in 1926 in Yonkers, New York. After serving in the U.S. Army during the Second World War, he worked as a publicity writer for the Remington Rand Corporation, and for a brief period in the 60s as a speechwriter for Senator Robert Kennedy. His prize-winning stories first appeared in 1953. His first novel, Revolutionary Road, was nominated for the National Book Award in 1962. He is the author of 8 other works, including The Good School, The Easter Parade, and Disturbing the Peace, 2 collections of short stories, 11 Kind of Loneliness, and Liars in Love. Richard Yates was twice divorced and the father of 3 children. He died in 1992. Now, I already had this book, Revolutionary Road, by Richard Yates, but I like the cover of it. I just like the cover. And it was only like, 50 cents. So then I picked up Survivor, a Czech Palahniuk novel. As you all know, I collect his writings. I'm probably mispronouncing his name. Please forgive me. I know I'm terrible at pronunciation, but I collect his writings. And I already had this, but like it says here, Spin has a comment on the top. The perfect compliment on our apocalyptic fixated times by Spin. I collect his writings. And I found this at a Goodwill store for 50 cents. I like the cover of it. I have another edition of this in our library down the lower level. I also picked up, which I didn't have, but looking for an edition that didn't have a movie cover on it, and it was Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk. In the back it says, Astonishing Seattle Times, Irresistible Scott Hymn, Diabolical Sharp Washington Post, Memorable Robert Stone. Now, Robert Stone is one of my favorite writers. I have all his writings in my main study, and I have pre-ordered a biography on Robert Stone. He just died recently. But I didn't have a copy of Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk. And as you see from my bookmarker, I've been reading it off and on since I got it Friday. I really like the cover. The inside of it is kind of cool. See the black eye? This was made into a movie with Brad Pitt and somebody else I can't remember right now. So I picked that up. And then I picked up this book I never saw before at a Goodwill store in Grand Haven. Catapult. This is by a Czechoslovakian writer, Vladimir Paral. And if I see anything in a foreign language and it's a translation and it looks interesting in the back, I'll buy it for 50 cents. I found another Snowman. This is a crime fiction by the Norwegian writer Joe Nesbo. As you know, I've been collecting him lately. And this is his, when I catalog this in library thing, this is the Snowman is #1 of his most popular crime novels. So I picked it up. And then I picked up, I found this at a Goodwill in Grand Haven, The Grace of Law, A Study in Puritan Theology by Ernest F. Kevan. Now, I already had this book, but this is one of the first books I read when I got into 17th century English Puritanism, and it's 50 cents, and I just got it because it was like an old time remembrance sake. I thought about doing a future video on the books that I have collected over the years on the Apostle Paul and the Mosaic Law or the Torah. But this is a very famous classic work, The Grace of Law and the Study of Puritan Theology by Ernest F. Kevan. This is very famous. It's only 50 cents and it's not marked. It's a clean text. So I just got it for old time's sake. And then I picked up at this novel by Tim Whitten, Dirt Music. Now, I already had this. I found this at a thrift store. He's an Australian writer, and I already had this in paperback. But I wanted it in hardback, and it was a clean text. It wasn't a library withdrawn. It's very clean. It has a nice slipcover on it. Nice in the back. And I've collected his writings. He's an Australian writer. I already had his novel in hardback, The Riders by Tim Whitten, a novel. So I have that. And today it's been snowing outside and the blowing snow, but there is a thrift store just 2 blocks from where we live, and it's called Bibles from Mexico. And my wife wanted me to mail some Christmas cards to friends of hers. And right next door to the mailbox is Bibles from Mexico. And I went in there. I hadn't been in a couple of weeks to look at their used books. And I found these. I found this novel by John Barth. As you all know, I've done past videos that I've collected, the writings of John Barth. John Barth is a very famous American modernistic writer. I really like his writings. I have been reading him for years. And I picked this up for 25 cents. Now, when I cataloged this thing in Library Thing, where I cataloged my books, I already had this, but I like the cover of it. The End of the Road, a brilliant novel of marital infidelity on a college campus by one of the most original talents of writing today, John Barth. And I really like John Barth. I read him for years. I've read John Barth. And so I picked this up. And then I found this novel, the classic Slum-Salford Life in the First Quarter of the Century by Robert Roberts. Robert Roberts was born in Stafford Slum in 1905, a son of a corner shopkeepers. After school, he was engineering apprentice for 7 years and was then unemployed for 3 years, during which he studied languages and how to start a revolution. While a teacher, he began to write stories, plays, BBC. He's a British writer, Robert Roberts. BBC scripts and stories, several of which won him scholarships and awards. After 16 years hill farming, Robert Roberts started to teach in prisons and become an acknowledged expert in adult illiteracy. Until his death, he was a well-known lecturer on this subject, both in universities on BBC. His other books are In Prison Tongues and Ragged Schooling. Now, I collect Penguin books, and I collect books on British history, and it says here in the back, the classic slum provides a grim affirmation of the truth of his remark, in a study which combines personal reminiscence with careful historical research. The myth of the good times, the good old good days, is summary dispensed with. Roberts could lose his job for belonging to a union, and when a family best clothes were likely to spend most weekdays at the pawn shop, the main effect of poverty in Edwardian Stanford was degradation, and despite great reserve of human courage, few could escape such a prison. The environment of slum housing and the atmosphere of hunger and insecurity created a culture belighted by ignorance, tedium, repression, and rigorous social stratification. I don't know. I collect books on 19th century, 20th century British history, and that's why I got this. And then I found this book at Bibles from Mexico, The Hollow Years, France in the 1930s by Eugen Weber. This was France translated out of the French. I think it was. Let me see. Maybe not. Maybe it was. Anyway, I collect books on the history of France, what was going on in art and literature in the France from 1900 to 1940, and it was only 25 cents. And it looked pretty interesting. There is some markings in it, but it was only 25 cents, so I got it. And I like reading about France in the 1930s, just after the First World War. There's a chapter in here I've been looking at. The decadence that was going on in Europe after the First World War. And then I picked this book up, Venice, A New History by Thomas F. Madden. I like reading about European history. Like I said, it was only a quarter. I have other books on Venice. As you know, right now in Venice is being flooded. It's underwater. When I go to the internet and look at news articles, Venice is underwater right now. But Venice had an important part in European history, and I read about European history. There's somebody's live thing in here, 2018. So it's only a quarter. I got all these books for $1. So, and like I showed you this book here, Living with the Dead, 20 Years on the Bus with the Jerry Garcia from the Grateful Dead, and the Grateful Dead by Scully with David Dalton. And I showed you these books, Love and Sleep by John Crowley, book 2 of the Egyptian Cycle. And I showed you this book already, Demalia, a novel by John Crowley. Endless Things, part of Egyptian by John Crowley. And I showed you his novel, Little Big by John Crowley. I've showed you these. I showed you this book. I've been reading this off and on. A Ship Made of Paper by Scott Spencer. I'm kind of torn between reading these two books. I really want to read this, but I'm really enjoying reading the Solitudes. I've been reading this tonight, but I really highly recommend Ship Made of Paper by Scott Spencer. And I look at this when I'm relaxing in the afternoons, living with the dead. So writing in my diary, tonight I'll be writing on page 2014. It is a Tuesday night here in West Michigan. It is now 18:19. No, it is 8 o'clock, 8:19 at night. So yeah, that's what I got at thrift stores. That's what I'm reading. That's what's going on in my existence as I flow along the death flow. Drinking wine, writing in my diary. Yeah, so tomorrow is a Wednesday. I got an email. I ordered some more books from Reformation Heritage Books. Another book by Jeremiah Burroughs and a book on covenant theology, which I'll probably get in the mail this week, and I'll show those in a future video. So I hope you're having a good week, and I hope you're all having a good reading week. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for the new subscribers. I really appreciate all your comments and for watching my videos. You know I'm kind of a very insecure person, and every time I get a new subscriber I feel more, it gives me a good feeling inside and makes me feel that I'm wanted and that people are not rejecting me, but that they are listening to my voice in the vast wasteland. So I'll drink some more wine, write in my diary, read my books. I highly recommend the writings of John Barth. I really love his writings. No, wait a minute. I hate that word loved. I find his writings very interesting. So check them out. And so I'll sign off. Also, before I finally close, read The Grace of the Law, a study of Puritan theology by Ernest F. Kevan. This is really a great book if you want, because when you read the New Testament, when you read the Pauline epistles, the issue of law and how it affects the Christian life is a very major issue in New Testament theology and the Christian life. How are we to view the law, the 10 Commandments that are found in the Old Testament and the Mosaic Covenant? And this is now I don't agree with this book, but it's an important stepping stone into thinking and reflecting on the role of the law or the 10 Commandments or the Torah, the Old Testament covenant, in the life of the Christian. So I'll sign off. Once again, I thank you for